The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Houston Texans both look to bounce back after losses last week. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bucs and Locked On Texans, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Texans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am James Yarcho, one of the hosts of Locked On Bucs, joined by Cody Davis, one of the hosts of Locked On Texans. And you can check both of us out on these shows 5 days a week, as well as on Twitter. I am at JYarcho_Bucs. He is at Cody Davis _24. And this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. The biggest matchups and the most important players are coming up for you in just a little bit. But Cody, let's start things off with the biggest storylines surrounding these two teams. Obviously, some familiarity with each other over the course of a couple of years, but you have the Buccaneers in a tailspin of a 3-game losing streak. You have the Houston Texans coming off the first win by the Carolina Panthers. So what is the biggest storyline in Houston right now?
It all starts with the Houston Texans on the offensive side of the ball. And a lot of it doesn't even have to do with the players. When you go back and you take a look at the game against the Carolina Panthers, where they lost 15-13, CJ Stroud, without a shadow of a doubt, played arguably, if not his worst game of the season, even more so than the very first game that the Texans lost against the Ravens. However, the one thing that drew everybody attention and was bugging everybody was the fact that it seemed like offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, he did not call a great game. And one of the things that has been hampering the Houston Texans, but more so against the Carolina Panthers, was it seems like the Texans are just relying too much on the run. And the biggest storyline coming into this game is, will we see a difference in Bobby Slowick's play calling, where you rely less on a run and put more trust, more responsibilities, more opportunities with CJ Stroud in your passing attack? And I've been saying this whole entire week. I get it. I understand it. Going into the season, you want it to be a run team. It makes sense. You was going into the season with a rookie quarterback, and we all know how rookie quarterbacks can go through a struggle. However, through the first 6 games of the season, CJ Stroud has put together one of the most impressive starts to a career. So it's like, not only do you have a quarterback that can go out there and make plays and help your team put points on the board, but your rushing attack has been so inefficient, especially considering that Dameon Pierce has he's been going through a sophomore slump. So it makes obvious sense as to why you should put more faith and more responsibility within your passing attack with CJ Stroud taking snaps under center. As a matter of fact, in the 4 games where the Houston Texans relied more so on their passing other than the run, you're looking at the second half against the Indianapolis Colts game, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Steelers, and the Saints. You're looking at 4 games where they went 3-1. The Texans averaged 24 points per game. However, in the games where they relied too heavy on a run, more so the game against the Falcons and the Carolina Panthers, like we saw this week, they didn't even come close to scratching 20 points. So, and those other 2 games are the same games where you lost by a field goal. So this offense, you keep saying you want it to be explosive. CJ Stroud said, in order for us to be explosive, we got to use our weapons. We got to go out there and actually execute where we're best at. The one thing I'll be giving a lot of praise to Bobby Slowick throughout this whole entire week, he listened to his players, and it seems like he's working with his players in order to make sure you put not only his players, but this team in the best position to go out there and succeed. This week, in terms of that offense, it's going to be very important to see whether or not we're going to see a change against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, by the way, have a very respectable defense.
Yeah, and I will publicly acknowledge to all of your listeners and viewers that I would go out of my way to criticize CJ Stroud, talk about how I would not draft him, I would not take him because he's an Ohio State quarterback and they all stink. Every single one of them stinks, not CJ Stroud. He has been absolutely fantastic this year. So again, I won't say that I'm completely wrong yet. There's still plenty of time. But for the sake of your viewers and listeners, I hope that I am wrong because he has been very good. And honestly, he's been kind of fun to watch. And you can see kind of those little traits that it's like, okay, down the line, when they really start to build up this offense, this could be a guy. You know, not just a guy, but a guy. So it has been fun to kind of watch him play a little bit this year. And it has been disappointing to watch Dameon Pierce's sophomore struggles. But,
yeah,
you know, again, that's another really fun player where the Houston Texans down the line are starting to put something together here. And you know, it's interesting to hear that you want to see them rely a little bit more on the passing game. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But the biggest story around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now is how they can pull themselves out of the tailspin that they are in and not lose their fourth straight game for the first time since 2019. You all remember the Jameis 30 for 30 season. That was the last time the Bucs lost 4 straight games. And since the bye week, the defense is allowing over 50% of third down conversions by opposing offenses. They cannot get off the field. They are giving up big plays. They are giving up explosive plays. They can't seem that the bend don't break defense that they have employed is starting to break. And it's costing them games. It's costing them opportunities, but it's not solely on the defense. The rushing game is still a mess. Now, it was nice to see Dave Canales start to adjust to that a little bit. Given the struggles of the run game, they're starting to do that run through the air thing that we saw a lot with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, where they're finding Rachaad White for these little dump offs right at the line or 1 yard past the line. And he's creating plays with his legs in an open space. Last week against the Bills, he finished with over 100 all-purpose yards. And a lot of that came on the receiving end because of these design dump-offs and getting him the ball in space, not relying on a struggling offensive line in run blocking to be able to run the ball. And I use air quotes. The other big thing has been the mental mistakes that are starting to snowball. You're having the pre-snap penalties. You have Trey Palmer that has negated 2 big plays because of holding penalties that didn't even affect the play in back-to-back weeks. He is struggling a lot blocking. You know, when Rachaad White or Keyshawn Vaughn or even Chase Edmonds really have broken off a big run, it's been brought back because of holding on Trey Palmer or holding on Cody Mauch. And these penalties, these issues that we're seeing from the same guys week after week, they're killing promising drives. They're negating explosive plays. And it's just continued to snowball and get worse during this losing streak. Baker Mayfield has been good. He has been efficient. But the Buccaneers offense has not been able to capitalize on his ability to create magic from escaping pressure, be able to convert third downs, be able to protect the football, which has been the biggest thing. And one thing I will say is that the Buccaneers have been a much better team on the road this season than they have been at home. So it's going to be interesting to see how this dynamic is going to match up with 2 teams coming off of losses and trying to reestablish themselves and really continue to try and stay in the thick of these divisional competitions.
James, I want to ask you something really quick because it's been real interesting to see what's been going on in Tampa Bay. How has the whole Baker Mayfield experience been? Because I remember at the start, I think it was OTAs or training camp. I can't remember which ones. The videos that we saw coming out of practice did not look so good. However, at the start of the season, but to your point, more so prior to the bye week, Baker Mayfield has been playing some really good football for you guys.
Yeah, and there are those detractors. You know, I see them all the time on our YouTube comments and everything, people that don't like Baker Mayfield are not going to come around and start liking Baker Mayfield. But a lot of people that were hesitant on Baker Mayfield have come around and said, you know what, this guy is playing pretty good football and he's doing a lot better than I expected. And, the videos that circulated in the offseason, they didn't show the 55-yard touchdown pass that Baker hit Mike Evans in stride. No. They're going to show
nothing about that.
because hitting Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in stride on 50-plus yard touchdown passes aren't going to get clicks. They're not going to go viral. But bad interceptions, bad passes, those will go viral. And it's hard to tell what was going on because you don't know the context of which the video was taken. So, it's been better than I expected. And I was one of the ones right after Tom Brady's retirement that said, Baker Mayfield's the guy for this team. The Bucs need a quarterback. I would give Baker Mayfield a shot because we know that he's capable. So he's started to get some people on his side, but there are some that are just they're never gonna join in. A lot like Jameis Winston. There were those people that didn't want Jameis, never wanted Jameis, and no matter what, they would look for reasons why they were right about not wanting Jameis versus giving Jameis his due or his props when he deserved it. But Cody, we are going to talk about the biggest matchups that are going to decide this game. That is next on a crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Did the game go to timeout? Time to order in with DoorDash. Is it halftime? That's ordering time. 2-minute warning. You got it. That's your cue to order in. Order for whatever craving strikes you. For the Locked On Bucs listeners, maybe they're in the mood for a Cuban sandwich with potato balls from Cuban Express. Maybe today's more of a shell seafood kind of day, or you're grabbing some wings from Shamrock's Ale House. For those of you taking the trip to Houston for the game, reach out to Cody. Find out some of the delicious spots there in Houston that you can get on DoorDash. All of your favorite restaurants and stores from retail to grocery are on the app, so you can shop everything that you need to get game day ready. Get prepared before the game. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all your tailgate gear on DoorDash. Then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change. Terms apply. Don't forget, use code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED, number 3, for up to 50% off, up to a $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change. Terms apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs and Locked On Texans your first listen or view every single day. Every day, just make sure you are coming back tomorrow for the final preview of this game on each of those channels. But football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live each Friday. Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra, Jarvis, and Kyle will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anybody else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Every game boils down to a few key matchups, and for the Texans, for those of you that have not seen the cutting room floor, I keep saying Titans, and I don't know if I'm looking ahead to next week or it's just
It's because the Titans wore Houston's colors over the past weekend, and trust me, down here in the city of Houston, we are not happy about that. Just let it go, Titans.
Those uniforms are so clean. They're so clean.
But it doesn't make sense in Tennessee. Come on, man. It's called, let's not get into all that. But, man, come on.
I will say that my son said that's the only reason DeAndre Hopkins played is because he thought he was back in Houston.
That makes a lot of sense. Because the man balled out. And correct me if I'm wrong, James. Has he had a game like that since leaving Houston? I don't think so. I think maybe one in Arizona, and that was that game-winning touchdown he had. I think that was in the 2020 season. But other than that, what has he done since? Nothing. But you give him the Houston colors, the man balls out. Come on, man.
He had some real solid games for the Cardinals. I'll give him that. But it's been a while.
Not like this though.
Not like this. Not a lot of receivers have games like that. But yeah, he thought he was back in Houston, and that's why he went absolutely nuclear. But every game boils down to a few key matchups. And for the Texans to bounce back after the Panthers loss and beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what is a matchup that they need to exploit?
They need to contain who I think might be the best two wide receiver duos in the league, and that's Michael Evans and Chris Godwin. The Texans cornerbacks have done a solid job throughout the season, especially given how Shaq Griffin has stepped in replace of Derek Stingley Jr., who's been on IR for I think about a month now. He has done a really good job being cornerback number 2. Steven Nelson is putting together, I would say, in my opinion, a Pro Bowl caliber season. He has been one of the top rated cornerbacks, not just for the Houston Texans. Well, he is the top rated cornerback for the Texans, but when you take a look at the league, I believe he hovers somewhere in the top 10, maybe top 15. But the Bucs, I've always said that Tampa Bay had the one of, if not the best combination of wide receiver number 1 and wide receiver number 2. I mean, as of right now, Michael Evans, Chris Godwin, they have a combined 960 yards so far this season. And then what makes them so dangerous, you never know who is going to have that breakout game. You take a look at Mike Evans, who I've always considered, I don't know about you guys, but a top 10 wide receiver in the league. By the way, I'm hoping that's somebody that the Houston Texans actually go after in free agency. Was kind of hoping that they traded for him, but I don't know. All I know is his contract is up. He's playing for a contract, and I know he would love to come back home down here in Texas. I believe he's from Galveston. Houston, Galveston is about a 45-hour drive, depending on how you drive. But Michael Evans, man, he had one of the best games for a wide receiver this season. What was it? I think he came against the Bears, so he had like 170, 175. That was a remarkable game. Then a couple weeks later, you had Chris Godwin, who broke out and had like a 120 game against the New Orleans Saints. Like, you never know which one of those guys are going to have a breakout performance. And I think it's going to be very important for Shaq Griffin, who once again has done a solid job replacing Derek Stingley Jr., even though Sunday was kind of a rough game for him. But it's going to be very crucial for Griffin and Steven Nelson to make sure that they continue to handle business against those two guys. You know, the whole secondary in general. But of course, you have to make sure that you put the most responsibilities on your cornerback. And of course, like I say, almost every single week here on this show, the Houston Texans front 4, their front 7, they have to make sure that they continue to go after the quarterback. They have been one of the top teams in the league at creating pressures, but every game, excluding the game against the Carolina Panthers, they have not done a good job at getting home and sacking the quarterback. But Sunday, that changed. They've done a very good job getting after the quarterback, and I think they had sacked Bryce Young, I believe, 6 times. They got to make sure that they continue to make the opposing team quarterback uncomfortable in order to get them off the field.
All I will say is Mike Evans isn't going anywhere. Don't get your hopes.
Hey, we praying and hoping.
At worst, he's getting franchise tag. Evans isn't going anywhere. All right, for the Buccaneers, it's Todd Bowles versus CJ Stroud, which is kind of what I alluded to talking about wanting the Texans to be a little more pass oriented. If anyone is going to make a rookie quarterback look like a rookie quarterback, it's going to be Todd Bowles. Now, CJ Stroud is completing just 47.9% of his passes when under pressure. The Bucs blitz at a rate top 4 in the NFL. So they are one of the most blitz happy defenses out there. They love to get that pressure on the quarterback. And now you have the return of Vita Vea, who missed a game against the Buffalo Bills, who is going to create problems for a banged up Houston Texans interior. So Stroud has been sacked 15 times this season, 4 in the last 2 games, did go a 3-game stretch without getting sacked at all. You know, it looked like shades of David Carr in the first 2 weeks. Like,
yeah, dude,
man, some help. But the offensive line has started to get it together a little bit. Went 3 games without allowing a sack. Now it's been 2 in each of the last 2 weeks. So CJ Stroud is getting the ball out a little bit quicker. He protects the ball, which is fantastic for a rookie quarterback. But Bowles is the best in the business at getting those disguised blitzes, bringing in pressure from unexpected spots. You know he's bringing Levante David. You know he's bringing Devin White. You know he's bringing all-pro safety Antoine Winfield Jr., the best safety in the National Football League. Come at me if you don't believe me. In addition to Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey along the defensive line, and he's brought in undrafted rookie corner Christian Izien on blitzes that have gotten home. So there's going to be a lot of chaos created around CJ Stroud to force him to throw the ball earlier than he wants to have to eat sacks, to try to escape pressure, which in turn is going to cause him to run directly into the arms of guys like Shaq Barrett and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. So all of this is to say that if the Bucs are going to get right, Todd Bowles has to dial up the right defense against a rookie quarterback, get him uncomfortable early, because you see from the numbers that when CJ Stroud is pressured, he's not as efficient as he generally is. And I think you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks, but for a rookie, it gets a little bit more, it gets placed under the magnifying glass a little bit more. So what has to go right for each team to get the win? And score predictions coming up next here on Locked On Texans and Locked On Bucs. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and they are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. With quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. This week, I'm going with Baker Mayfield for more than 224.5 passing yards, CJ Stroud more than 8.5 rushing yards, Mike Evans more than 59.5 receiving yards, and Nico Collins less than 55.5 receiving yards. This is going to be a Tank Dell day. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Cody, we have laid out some things for each team so far, but let's put the cherry on top of this Houston versus Tampa Bay Sunday and talk about what needs to go right in order for each team to get the win. What has to go right for Houston?
Going back to the way I opened the show, Bobby Sloyd needs to make sure that he makes changes to this offense. And James, you say something interesting in terms of the matchup. You say CJ Stroud versus Todd Bowles. I am interested in that matchup because I've heard the same thing when the Texans played against the Pittsburgh Steelers, i.e. Mike Tomlin, and when the Texans played against the New Orleans Saints, i.e. Dennis Allen. Mm-hmm. And what is something that all three of those guys have in common? You're looking at some, if not of the best defensive-minded coaches of their generations. However, CJ Stroud played very well against the Steelers and the New Orleans Saints, more so the first half against the New Orleans Saints. And I am confident to say that I'm pretty sure he's going to have a pretty good game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and against against Todd Bowles as well. So, you know, the biggest thing for the Houston Texans right now, Bobby Sloyd. Once again, I've been giving him a lot of praise throughout the season. Every time he has a questionable game or a questionable moment, we see him makes the necessary adjustments, and we see them excel at what they struggled in the week before. And he has to make sure that he continue to learn and develop and change up the offensive game plan for this organization and for the chance of this team coming away victorious.
All right. Well, yeah, it will be an interesting matchup. I'm gonna lean Todd Bowles, but again, I was wrong on CJ Stroud through the whole process. I could be wrong on this one too. And my what has to go right is right there in line with yours. Look, this Buccaneers defense has to get off the field on third downs. The Bills last week at one point were 6 of 9 on third down. They finished 7 of 13, still above 50%, but they had also gone into conservative mode. And who knows if that horrendous no call on a Hail Mary even happens, if the Bills opt to go ahead and go for those fourth downs instead of punting the ball away. If the pass rush for the Buccaneers doesn't get home, forcing an early pass into danger, which they are so good at doing, or getting a sack, the secondary has not been holding up, especially on deep passes. So getting off the field on third down was something that the Bucs did often and consistently in the first 4 weeks when they went 3-1, when they beat the Vikings, when they beat the Saints, when they beat the Bears. They lost to the Eagles, but so does pretty much everybody else. Guys like Devin White, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, they've been awfully quiet this season. They have not been living up to their name, to their hype, to their contract. Devin White wants to be that super paid $100 million linebacker, and that value is just continuing to do this when he hits free agency because of the kind of season he's having this year. So they have to step up and they have to create plays to get the offense the ball, to have pass breakups on third down, to get takeaways, to get sacks. This team has to figure out a way to get back to that first quarter of the season defense that was giving the offense plenty of opportunity, not the one that is unable to get off the field and is allowing 7, 10, 12 play scoring drives to opposing offenses. So, Cody, it's the Houston Texans, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's the Mike Evans homecoming. So you know he wants to put on a show for all of his friends and family there in Galveston. How do you see this one shaking out?
I could see this one shaking out in favor of the Texans. They've lost their last 2 games. Well, not last 2 games, but the last 2 games that they have lost came on a field goal. But I think this time the Texans will win by a field goal. And we're going to see this be a very exciting game. I think the changes that we want to see both teams make, I think they're going to make the necessary adjustments. However, I have the Houston Texans winning 24-21. CJ Stroud against Todd Bowles is going to show why he is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best. And I think we can probably already call it as for right now, the best quarterback to come out of Ohio State. I really do believe that he's going to go out there and have a really good game. Especially, it wasn't just Bobby Sloyd and CJ Stroud who had subpar games against the Carolina Panthers, excluding the defense, excluding the front 4, the front 7. I think almost every position group has kind of a subpar day, and I think this is going to be the game where everybody gets back on track.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, the Buccaneers are a better team on the road than they are at home. Their red zone efficiency is more than double on the road what it is at home. And I have to go with Todd Bowles against a rookie quarterback. We've seen that movie a lot of times. Very rarely does the ending ever change. I do think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I don't know if it's going to be exciting. I hope you're right in that aspect, because a lot of these Buccaneers games this year have been ugly. They've been grinders. They've been frustrating. But I do think the Buccaneers finally get back on track. Of course, I thought they were going to get back on track against the Falcons. But I think they get back on track in Houston, winning this one 23-14. All right, that is going to do it for this crossover episode of Locked On Bucs and Locked On Titans. Make sure you are checking out both shows 5 days a week on the Locked On Podcast Network. Check out everything that we are doing on Twitter. Cody is at Cody Davis _24. I am at Yarcho _Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for joining us right here on a crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.